Nobody prepared her for this. Not her friends, not the cultural script she had been handed since she was a teenager. Certainly not the version of attraction she had spent 40 years believing was the whole story. She is in her late 30s, accomplished, self aware, the kind of woman who has read enough psychology to know the difference between what she thinks she wants and what she actually responds to. And she is sitting across from a man who just turned 63, watching something in herself happen that she has no comfortable framework to place. She is not just attracted to him. She is pulled toward him in a way that feels qualitatively different from every attraction she has experienced before. Deeper, quieter, more physical than emotional, but somehow more emotional than anything physical she has felt before. And she cannot explain it. Not in a way that satisfies the version of herself that believed she understood how this worked. What she is responding to is not his age, not his success, not his appearance or his history or any of the conventional variables she was taught to evaluate. It is one specific thing he does, or more precisely, one specific thing he has stopped doing. Something that men under 50 almost never stop doing. Something that, the moment it disappears from a man's behavior, creates a gravitational pull in women that evolution itself designed into the female nervous system for reasons science has now documented with extraordinary precision. Stay with me until the end, because what this man has stopped doing is the last thing you would expect. And once I show you the neuroscience of why its absence produces the specific response I am describing, you are going to look back at the last 10 years of your life and understand something that was happening the entire time without either a name or an explanation. What evolution built into her. Before I show you this specific thing, you need to understand what is happening in her nervous system at the biological level. Because without this foundation, the thing I am going to describe sounds like intuition. With it, it sounds like exactly what it is, an evolutionary detection system running its most ancient and most precise algorithm. Evolutionary psychologists studying long-term mate selection in women have identified a consistent pattern across cultures, age groups, and historical periods. Women evaluate potential partners on two primary biological axes simultaneously. The first is genetic quality, signals of health, symmetry, and physical vitality. The second, and in most long-term attraction contexts, the more powerful axis, is what researchers call resource acquisition and holding capacity. Not just the presence of resources, the demonstrated ability to acquire, hold, and deploy resources in service of offspring survival. Here is where men over 60 create a neurological response that younger men simply cannot replicate. Because resource acquisition and holding capacity is not signaled through the presence of resources alone. It is signaled through something more specific, more behavioral, and more immediately readable by the female nervous system. It is signaled through the complete absence of the behavior of men who are still trying to acquire, still proving, still performing, still in the exhausting, continuous, socially visible effort of becoming something. A man who is still becoming something broadcasts a specific neurological signature, subtle anxiety in his baseline state, a slight edge of self-monitoring in every social interaction, the micro-tension of a person whose sense of value is still contingent on external validation. Her nervous system reads the signature in under 60 seconds, not as weakness necessarily, but as incompletion, as a man whose identity is still under construction and therefore still vulnerable to collapse. And now place a man of 63 who has genuinely, completely, and irreversibly stopped performing next to that signature. The contrast is not subtle. It is one of the most dramatic neurological contrasts the female attraction system ever encounters. The thing he has stopped doing. Here it is, plainly. He has stopped performing his value, not because he gave up, not because he stopped caring about how he presents himself to the world, but because decades of real accumulation of actual building and losing and rebuilding, of proving himself in contexts that cost him something real, have produced a self that no longer requires external confirmation to feel stable. He knows what he is worth, not as an opinion, as a lived certainty. And men who know what they are worth with that specific quality of certainty do not perform it. They do not need to. The performance is for people who are not yet sure. And he is sure. This quality, this complete, settled, non-performative selfhood is what the research identifies as the single most attractive quality a man can carry in the context of female long-term attraction. Not his assets, not his physique, not his social proof. The specific quality of a man whose identity does not flex under social pressure because it was not built on social pressure to begin with. Behavioral researchers have a term for this state. They call it terminal security. The psychological condition of a person who has resolved the fundamental question of their own value and no longer experiences it as an open question that incoming social information can reopen. It is called terminal, not in the morbid sense, but in the mathematical sense. The terminal point of a process. The place the process was always moving toward. The completion of the long, difficult, privately constructed answer to the question, am I enough? The man over 60 who has done the real work of his life, who has stayed in the fire of his own becoming long enough to come out the other side as something finished and real and no longer in process, is a man who has reached that terminal point. And the female nervous system responds to it with an immediacy and an intensity that she herself is often shocked by. Why her body responds before her mind does I want to give you something from my own experience here, something I have only understood clearly in retrospect. There is a quality that some older men carry that I have never been able to fully describe until I understood the neuroscience behind it. The best word I had for it before was gravity, as in a specific man walks into a room and the room reorganizes around where he is standing. Not because he announced himself, not because he demanded attention, because something about the quality of his presence drew attention toward it the way mass draws light. I have felt this in rooms with men in their 60s who were not conventionally impressive by any surface level measure, and I have felt its complete absence in rooms with objectively more impressive men who were half their age. The difference was not what they had, it was what they were no longer carrying. The younger men were still carrying the performance. The specific, invisible, energetically expensive performance of a man whose inner world is still organized around being seen, being validated, being confirmed in his value by the response of the room around him. You can feel it when you are near it. The slight hunger in the attention, the almost imperceptible monitoring of how he is landing. The quality of presence that is never quite fully in the moment because a part of it is always watching from slightly outside. The older man who has stopped performing carries none of that weight. He walks into the room and he is simply there. No monitoring, no performance, no part of him watching from the outside. Just his full presence, completely inside the moment, with no surplus energy going toward management. And when a man is that fully present, something in a woman's nervous system responds to it with the same involuntary attention you pay to silence after extended noise. The contrast is felt before it is understood. Her body registers the difference before her mind has had time to form an opinion about why she is suddenly interested in a man she might have walked past if she were relying on conventional criteria. The three behavioral signatures. Now I want to make this completely concrete. Because terminal security is a concept until it has specific, observable behavioral expressions. Here are the three that the research identifies as most consistently triggering in the female attraction response. The first is opinion permanence. A man in the process of performing his value adjusts his opinions based on the reception they receive, not dramatically, subtly. A slight softening when his view meets resistance. A minor revision when a woman he is attracted to expresses a different perspective. The adjustment is so small it is almost invisible, but it is felt. Her nervous system reads it as the signal that his selfhood is still porous, still available to be reshaped by external pressure. The man who has stopped performing does not do this. Not because he is rigid or unkind or closed to being influenced, but because his opinions are formed from genuine experience and reflection, and they do not require social ratification to feel stable. If she disagrees with him, he remains interested in her perspective without revising his own to reduce the friction between them. He can hold both simultaneously without discomfort. This is felt by women as something they often describe as solidity, as the specific physical sensation of leaning against something and finding that it does not give. It is not hardness. It is the warmth of something real and reliable. And after years of men who shifted when pushed, that solidity produces a response in her nervous system that she was not prepared for. The second is unhurried speech. Research in psychoacoustics documents that vocal tempo and pitch are among the most immediate and reliable nonverbal signals of internal regulation. High cortisol, high performance states produce faster speech, slightly elevated pitch, and micropauses that indicate active cognitive monitoring. The voice of a man who is managing his own performance carries the acoustic signature of that management. The man over 60 who has stopped performing speaks differently, more slowly, not because he is searching for words, because he has no urgency about how his words are being received. His sentences arrive in their own time. His pauses are comfortable rather than anxious. His vocal tone sits in the lower register of his natural range because nothing in the interaction has activated the sympathetic nervous system response that raises it. Women experience this voice as almost physically grounding. In a world of voices that carry the acoustic signature of their own performance anxiety, a voice that carries none of it creates a contrast that lands in her body before she has processed it cognitively. Her own nervous system begins to regulate toward it. Her breathing slows, her cortisol drops. She becomes, without deciding to become, more physically open in his presence than she was 1 minute before. If what I am describing is opening something for you right now, hit the like button right now. Because this is the information that most men over 50 have been carrying without knowing what they have. And every person who engages with this video helps another man find it at exactly the moment he needs it most. Now, let me give you the third signature, because this one is the reason the attraction does not fade. The third is the absence of outcome dependence. Here is the cliffhanger I want you to sit with for a moment. You have probably heard some version of this principle before in 100 different contexts. But what the neuroscience reveals about why this specific quality in a man over 60 produces a different response than it does in a younger man is something I have never heard explained correctly anywhere until now. Outcome dependence, the degree to which a man's emotional state is contingent on the result of any given interaction, is something women detect at a level of precision that is almost impossible to consciously conceal. The dopamine response of a man who needs a specific outcome from an interaction produces micro-behavioral signatures throughout the entire encounter. A slightly heightened quality of attention when she responds positively, a fractional shift in his energy when she becomes less engaged. The specific quality of someone for whom the end of the interaction represents a verdict rather than simply the natural completion of a moment. Her nervous system reads all of it, and what it reads confirms that his emotional stability is contingent on what she decides, that his inner state has placed itself in her hands. The man over 60 who has genuinely stopped performing has, through the accumulation of enough genuine experience, arrived at a condition of real outcome independence. Not the performed version younger men attempt, which she detects immediately as its own form of management. The genuine version. The kind that comes from having wanted things badly enough and lost them fully enough to learn at the deepest biological level that your nervous system can survive any outcome. When she encounters this in a man, the effect on her desire is the opposite of what most people would predict. It does not reduce her interest, it ignites it. Because his emotional stability does not depend on her response, she finds herself working entirely involuntarily to produce a response that will matter to him. The wanting moves from him toward her, and the wanting that moves from a place of genuine desire toward a man who is not waiting for it lands in her as the specific, irresistible pull that she will spend the rest of that evening trying to understand. Why this only gets more powerful with age here is the final piece, and it is the one that directly addresses the belief that age diminishes a man's capacity to create this response in a woman. The qualities I have described, terminal security, opinion permanence, unhurried speech, genuine outcome independence, are not qualities that can be constructed. They cannot be assembled through technique or learned in a seminar or simulated convincingly enough to fool the female nervous system at the biological level where her actual evaluations are made. They are built through years, through the specific, unglamorous, privately experienced process of being genuinely tested and genuinely surviving, through losses that were real, through moments of collapse and the subsequent discovery that collapse is survivable, through the gradual, accumulative resolution of the question that every young man carries in some form and every genuinely mature man has finally answered. Which means that every year past 60, if the work has been done, if the real encounters have been lived through and not merely survived but metabolized into genuine selfhood, adds another layer of density to the specific quality her nervous system is looking for. Not because she is after security in the financial or social sense, because her evolutionary biology is designed to prioritize exactly what time builds in a man who does not waste his years performing them. You are not becoming less attractive as you age. You are becoming more of what the deepest, most biologically fundamental level of female attraction was always looking for. The performance is what diminishes, the reality builds, and she can feel the difference between them at a level so deep that she herself cannot always explain why she cannot stop thinking about a man she met last week who is 63 years old and did nothing obviously impressive except be completely, irreversibly, and without any effort at all himself. That is the gravity she felt. That is the pull she could not account for. That is the thing that younger men cannot replicate because they have not yet had enough time to finish becoming it. You have had the time. The question is whether you have used it to perform or to build. And the woman across the room from you will know the answer to that question before you have finished your first sentence, because her nervous system has been reading for this her entire life. And what it reads when it finally finds it is not a thought. It is a physical recognition so deep and so certain that all the conscious criteria she has spent decades constructing simply stop mattering. You cannot fake terminal security, but you can arrive at it. And the man who arrives at it fully, genuinely, without residue of performance, is the man she will not be able to explain to her friends, to herself, or to the part of her that keeps insisting she should be able to resist this. She cannot resist it. She was never designed to. Subscribe to this channel right now, because this is where the real evolutionary science and neuroscience of male attraction in the second half of life gets spoken plainly, without the comfortable version that stops before it reaches what actually matters. Like this video and share it with a man over 50 who has been convinced that what he is building is becoming less valuable. It has never been more valuable. He simply needs to stop performing it long enough for her to feel what is actually there. And the next video takes this even further. Do not miss it.